Well, hello everyone. My name is Whitney Cravens, and tonight my revolutionary idea is embrace growth and define your identity in the in-between. But first, a little bit about me. I'm from the great state of Missouri, which is far better than its less superior neighbor of Kansas. I'm also really passionate about international relations, and I love to travel. So this is me in Rome, where I studied abroad. And then this is me in Lima, Peru, at the best burger restaurant in the world. So for all those of you that ship either In-N-Out or Whataburger, I'm really sorry to tell you, but you're all wrong. I'm also a senior, so can anyone in the audience tell me what might be the number one question I get asked as a senior? Yeah, a lot of people, wow. Okay, so clearly I get asked a lot, what am I doing after graduation? So this is a question I've been considering since pretty much the end of junior year. I would look up at this map in my room and I would think, where in the world am I going to end up next? And so I ended up applying to the Peace Corps. And I was really excited about this, and I applied in October, and I interviewed in the same month as well, but then I didn't hear back. And I found myself in where I would like to call the in-between. And the in-between I would define as a time in which you don't know what life holds next. Maybe you don't know what your job will be, you don't know where you're going to move next. It's a time when your answer hasn't come or a door hasn't opened. And it's really scary. If you've experienced the in-between, you know this. But for me, when I was in the in-between, I was constantly anticipating the future. I was waiting and expecting an email from the Peace Corps and checking my email every single day. And it was just a really scary time where I was constantly anticipating what was ahead. And I was living this way, just looking forward to the future on autopilot until finally one day I woke up. And this happened on a car ride on the way to Trader Joe's, which if you haven't been, you have to go because it's like the best grocery store in the world. But I was driving to Trader Joe's on I-20, and one day, and I was listening to a podcast, and this particular podcast was from a church in DC where I used to live, and it featured a guest speaker named Drew McClure, and what he said really challenged me. And what he said, can I believe that there is another version of me, that I'm not done yet, that there's a whole parts of my being that I have still yet to access, to meet, to uncover. Can I believe, or do I believe in being tinkered with? Am I willing to come out with a new version of myself? And what he said was that there's two sides of who you are. There's who you are, there's where you are, and there's how you are. And then in the future, there's who you could be, there's where you could be, and there's how you could be. And that this space in between is what he calls your sacred journey. And it's not about starting from where you wish you were, but it's about starting from where you actually are. And it's about learning to embrace and to embody and to be present in, and to actually ask those questions, who am I? Where am I? How am I? Am I actually self-aware? And so he challenged me in that, and he also said, you'd be surprised at how hard it is to answer those questions if you hadn't paused enough to get out of autopilot in your life and to engage with the processes of self-awareness. And so I realized in a really disturbing moment of realization that I didn't have the answers to these questions, that I had been moving forward throughout life, continuously looking towards the future, hoping to be out of the in-between, but I didn't know who I was today. I was unsure of my identity in the present. And how was I going to know who I wanted to be and how I could be and where I could be in the future if I didn't know the answers to those questions today? And at this point in time, I was living in such autopilot that I had gone entire days without realizing that my pants were on backwards. I had gone, for instance, in meetings with administration on campus and later realized at the end of the day that I had my pants on backwards. So, I was living on such autopilot that in the in-between, I realized that I was in a crisis of self-awareness. So I started to ask these questions of who am I, how am I, and where am I? And if you'll just indulge me for a second, I'd like to take a moment with you to let you reflect on these questions. So if you'll just take a moment and close your eyes with me and start to reflect on these as well. First, I'm just going to start with, where am I? Can you think of a word that describes this season of life that you're in? Maybe you're in the in-between, but it's okay if you're not. But what's a word or phrase? And then, how am I? How am I doing really? Am I sad? Am I happy? Am I confused? Am I healthy? What's a word or phrase that you could use to articulate how you're doing? And then finally, last but not least, who am I? What words or phrases come up when you think of this? What hats do you wear? Who do you say that you are? Okay, you can open your eyes. So I go through this just to demonstrate that when I started to ask these questions myself, it was really eye-opening for me. I realized that I'd been moving throughout life and wasn't able to answer these questions because I'd been equating my identity with the different roles and positions and titles that I wore or that I was in. And I'd done this while moving throughout autopilot in life. And that throughout this process of continually moving forward and focusing on the future, I was losing my sense of self. And that believing I am what I do was covering myself in different masks of my true self with different activities. And psychiatrist Carl Jung says that I'm not alone in this, that it's actually a way individuals adapt to the world or respond to the world by putting on a persona. And so throughout high school, I did this either by putting on the persona of a debate captain or AP student, or in college, it's been everything from Model UN to serving at church. And so I started to ask these questions about my identity and evaluating myself in the in-between. And it required me to get really vulnerable with myself and to ask questions that I'd never really considered before. And I started to evaluate all the different aspects of my life, whether it was politically or socially or relationally. Who am I? Where am I? And how am I? And this is what I learned. I learned that who I am is that I can be accepted for being authentic. I was thinking that I had to put on all of these masks to be loved more, but that people would actually love me and accept me for who I was in an authentic sense. And the best example of this, as many of you are reading, is for a long time I was really struggling with coming out about my political identity. I thought that I had to be ashamed of what I believed in, and I thought that people would reject me if I was honest about my political beliefs. But in reality, the exact opposite happened. When I came out and told people what I believed in, people accepted me, they embraced my boldness, and they were very encouraging about it, from friends to family to even strangers. And so then, where I am. I figured out that I'd been struggling where I was with this ideal of perfectionism, but that it was okay to be a mess, that people would love me if I was not all put together all the time, and that I could be loved no matter where I was and how I was doing. And I could also love others and meet them where they were at as well. And so my relationships were able to improve when I stopped expecting other people to be perfect, and I let others love me exactly where I was as well. And then finally, how I am. A year ago, right after that picture I showed you when I was in Peru, I was really sick, and I thought it was from food poisoning, but in reality, it was actually because I was stressed out. And I was stressed out because I was constantly trying to please others, and I was just living my life, basically saying yes to everyone, and I just didn't know how to say no. But asking myself honestly, how am I, and realizing that I had some unhealthy stages, I was able to put that to rest and able to say no sometimes and find health in solitude and being alone. So I started to embrace the in-between rather than resist it or wish it to be over all the time. I'm not saying I wasn't still wanting to hear back from the Peace Corps, but I was more comfortable growing and transforming during that space and time that I had rather than constantly anticipating the future. As my favorite band, Mumford & Sons, says, I know my call despite my faults and despite my growing fears. So basically, I was still afraid of the future, and I was finding out about a lot of faults about myself, but because of this process of growing in self-awareness in the in-between, I knew exactly where I wanted to be and how I wanted to be and who I wanted to be in the future. And because of that, when I heard back from the Peace Corps, I was able to accept, and I'm really excited about that. And Bill Watterson says, we're so busy watching out for what's ahead of us that we don't take time to enjoy where we are. So I would encourage you to enjoy and embrace where you are. Thank you.